A severed arm dangled before me, its hand still clutching a grenade with the pin pulled. A monster of a truck, weighing dozens of tons, pressed down on my chest, while dark purple sludge gushed wildly from bullet holes in the steel plates. Our fully armed U.S. Army squad hadn't managed to stop it. Instead, we'd become the pulverized meat inside a tin can. This was no ordinary car bomb. The lenses of my goggles were shattered into a spiderweb pattern, and red seeped through the cracks. My blood, someone else's blood, it was impossible to tell. Gritty sand clung to the inside of the glass, scraping painfully with every blink. I was pinned. The Humvee had flipped over, its steel roof crushing down on my chest, right at the ribs. My right leg was jammed between the chassis and the road, the knee facing forward but the foot twisted backward. I saw it. I really did. A white, jagged piece of bone protruded from my pant leg, flesh still clinging to it, soaked in diesel. The mix of oil and blood was indistinguishable. Something moved behind me. I couldn't turn my head. My neck was locked in place. Heavy vibrations came through the ground, each thud followed by a slow, grating sound. Then, warm liquid dripped onto the back of my neck. The skin sizzled as if pressed with a lit cigarette burning deep. It hurt. An arm hung in the air before me, torn clean off at the shoulder. The stump was a mangled mess of flesh and blood, as if ripped apart by a hooked meat grinder. Shards of bone mixed with shredded muscle, and white tendons stretched out like over-soaked rubber bands, dangling limply. The hand still gripped a grenade, an M67, its pin missing. The fingers were clenched so tightly the knuckles were white, as if welded to the grip. Above me, the Humvee's body slammed down another foot, at least. The steel screeched, the crumpled metal driving straight into the broken edges of my ribs. I could feel bone fragments piercing my lung. With each breath, a gurgling sound rose in my throat, and a spray of hot, bloody foam choked out of my mouth. The sun was blocked. Something loomed over me. I couldn't see its face, only felt the light vanish, the temperature drop, and a bitter, alkaline smell filled the air. The shadow pressed down. Before the truck charged, we'd been stationed at Grey Widow checkpoint for 2 full days. Grey Widow was no paradise. A broken road flanked by sand and rocks, hot enough to peel your skin. The intel was vague. An unmarked heavy truck was moving along this route, its cargo container covered in large welded patches. The photos were blurry, but it did look like makeshift armor plating. In the briefing room, the sergeant slapped the photo onto the whiteboard and said, "A mobile car bomb. Blow it up if you can't stop it." We believed it. In that place, we'd seen every kind of modified vehicle. Just after 4 p.m. the next day, with the sun blazing, a cloud of yellow dust rose at the far end of the road. Through binoculars, I saw it, the truck. An old freight cab pulling a container-sized cargo box. But the exterior looked off, too smooth, not welded, as if carved from a single block of something. Sunlight reflected off it, but the glare wasn't harsh. It was unnaturally dark, as if swallowing the light. "Target approaching. Prepare stop signals." The loudspeaker blared, warning lights flashed, and roadblocks were laid. The truck didn't slow. It rolled over the spike strips. I heard the tires burst, rubber fragments flying high, steel rims grinding against the asphalt, sparks trailing like a dragon's tail. But it didn't stop. Instead, it accelerated, charging straight toward us. I raised the radio to call for air support, but the headset filled with piercing static, high frequency, like a swarm of insects buzzing in the mic. I tore it off, but the noise persisted. Something was jamming it. The sergeant slapped my shoulder and yelled, "Pursue! Don't let it get away!" 2 Humvees roared to life. Mine took the right flank, the other the left. Gunners mounted the M2S, firing at its rear wheels and engine hood. The bullets hit with a strange sound, asterisk thud asterisk, like striking wet wood. After a few bursts, fist-sized holes dotted the cargo container. Then, something began oozing from the holes. Black, sticky, thicker than engine oil, more like tar. It seeped from the edges of the bullet holes, crawling slowly down the container's surface. The wind blew, and before it could drip halfway, it solidified. The metal around the holes darkened to a purplish black, like bruised skin swelling. The gunner cursed over the comms. "What the hell is this?" No one had an answer. We chased it all the way to a dried-up riverbed. Another Humvee accelerated from the left, ramming the side of the truck with its front end. The two Humvees pinned it, pushing it against the rocky wall of the riverbank, forcing it to a grinding halt. The engine was still running, black smoke billowing from the exhaust pipe, and a new smell filled the air. It was like burnt plastic mixed with the scent of copper, drying out my throat the longer I breathed it in. The sergeant gave the order. "Breaching team, move in. Force open the cargo compartment. Let's see what's inside." Morales and I hoisted the hydraulic door opener and moved forward. We called that thing the key, weighing dozens of pounds. It could pry open most vehicle doors and cargo hatches. The moment we got close, a freezer-like chill hit our faces, turning our breath into white clouds. Black liquid dripping from bullet holes had pooled on the sandy ground into plump, round beads, rolling around like mercury droplets. Stepping on them made a sharp pop, and they'd split open, still black inside. Morales aimed the opener's spreader at the seam of the cargo door. As soon as the hydraulic pump activated, the spreader pushed outward with a creak, but the door didn't open. The metal should have bent by now, but instead, the door was dented inward, forming a concave shape like a pit. The edges were changing color, shifting from dark gray to purple. It was wet. I crouched down to look at the spot where the spreader was pressing. The area around it was darkening, with amber-colored, translucent mucus seeping from the edges, dripping down the metal head of the spreader and quickly coating half the hydraulic rod. What we previously assumed were welded patches, in the intel were now unmistakable. They were carapace. The kind of segmented, curved patterns you'd see on an arthropod shell, like growth rings. Morales let go and took a step back. His mouth hung open, as if trying to shout something but failing to make a sound. The entire truck was alive. Morales took that step back, mouth agape, a choke sound forcing its way from his throat. It was incomplete, half a scream, half a question, stuck in his windpipe. The seam of the cargo compartment, where the spreader had pressed, suddenly flared open like a muscle spasm. I saw the swollen, purplish-black tissue convulse violently, like a muscle twitching after a punch to the arm. Then the seam tore open with a wet, ripping sound, asterisk squelch star. Inside the tear were layers of deep red, wet, soft tissue, densely covered with serrated, hard ridges. The ridges were yellowish, like bone or fingernails, layered one over another, receding into the depths with no end in sight. Then the airflow rushed out. The air blasted from the cavity, carrying a stench so foul it made my stomach lurch into my throat. From deep within the cavity came a tremendous suction, like a giant lung violently inhaling in reverse. Morales was right in front, directly in the path of the suction. His upper body was yanked inside in an instant. There was no chance to struggle. His combat boots remained on the ground, his calves and knees still there, but everything above the knees was gone, swallowed into that tear. His legs kicked frantically outside, boots digging 2 trenches in the sand, ankles twisting left and right, muscles taut to the breaking point. 4 kicks. The 5th one stopped. The cavity walls began to flare outward. The entire cargo compartment's carapace exploded open layer by layer, 7 or 8 thick plates, their edges lined with scythe-like bone spikes. The spikes flared outward against their joints, like a Venus flytrap blooming in reverse. Once the carapace fully opened, I saw what was inside. At the outermost were a pair of main mandibles, horizontally aligned, thicker than my entire torso, dark gray, and densely covered with barbs. Behind the mandibles were rows upon rows of smaller mouthparts, each moving independently at different rhythms, some chewing, some contracting. Innumerable appendages extended from the center, thin and long with segmented joints, their tips shaped like pincers, clawing wildly in the air like drowning people reaching for help. Deep inside was a hole. It contracted rhythmically, pumping like a throat swallowing. The soles of Morales' boots were disappearing into the edge of the opening. As the last boot was swallowed, the muscular tissue of the hole's walls clenched, squeezing a stream of blood from the boot shaft, which trickled down the cavity walls. Open fire! Open fire! The sergeant's voice cracked. Everyone pulled their triggers simultaneously. My finger froze on the trigger, but as soon as the gunfire erupted, my body moved on autopilot. My M4 pressed against my shoulder. I aimed at the open carapace. With each kick of the muzzle, bullets struck it with a sharp crack, like bullets hitting ceramic tiles. The carapace only showed white marks, shallow cracks, and a few scattered fragments, nothing more. 5 rounds. 10 rounds. A full magazine. It wouldn't penetrate. The gunner on the Humvee roof fired the M2. The 50 caliber rounds shook the ground with their thunderous roar. Thump, 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 thump. The muzzle flashes were blinding even in broad daylight. The rounds were effective when they struck the appendages. I saw one hit, and the joint exploded instantly, spraying white lymph like a fountain, splattering far and wide. Some landed on the Humvee's hood, sizzling against the metal and sending up plumes of white smoke. The severed appendage fell to the ground, twitching and writhing in the sand like a chopped-off snake's tail. At the stump, the remaining muscle tissue curled outward as new tissue pushed its way out, pink, wet, and already darkening and hardening as it emerged. The orifice that had swallowed Morales was still contracting. The smaller mouthparts hadn't stopped working, they kept chewing. I could hear it, the sound of bones being crushed, a continuous, muffled crack, crack, crack echoing from deep within the cavity, mixed with the wet, squelching noise of churned flesh. The sergeant fired a grenade from his underslung launcher into the orifice. The grenade flew in and detonated with a dull thud. Soft tissue inside the cavity was blown apart, spraying chunks of meat and white fluid that splattered across my chest. The thing let out an incredibly deep, guttural groan, vibrating the zipper on my body armor. Then, the flesh around the edges of the hole began to writhe and squeeze inward, sealing shut like a zipper. "Reloading! Reloading!" someone shouted. My magazine was empty. I ejected it, slammed a fresh one in, tapped the release, and chambered a round. My hands were shaking. The magazine caught for half a second before it clicked into place. The entire truck began to move. When the 6 legs extended from beneath, the fake tires were torn apart. The 6 segmented limbs were as thick as bridge piers, each joint covered in stiff bristles. They plunged into the sand with a muffled thump. The claw-like tips were crescent-shaped, like sickles, gleaming coldly in the sunlight. The front of the truck lifted. It had been pressed against the rock wall, but now it was hoisted into the air, dangling with the exhaust pipe still puffing black smoke. The cab doors swung open, empty. No driver, no steering wheel. The control panel was replaced by wet, fleshy red tissue. The dashboard had melted away, leaving only a few wires dangling outside, soaked in mucus. "Fall back! Spread out!" The sergeant waved us back. I retreated from beside the breaching tool, my boots crushing the black spheres on the ground. They popped open, trailing sticky strands. My rifle remained trained on the creature as it rose from its crouch to full height, tall as a bus, supported by 6 legs. Its shell still resembled a truck trailer, but the welded patches were now gently pulsing, as if breathing. The appendage severed by the M2 had already regrown halfway. The new shell was still soft and translucent, filled with cloudy fluid. The severed limb on the ground continued to twitch, its rhythm synchronized with the pulsing of the main body's shell. 1 step, 1 twitch, 1 step, 1 twitch. The stench in the air had become unbearable, a mix of alkaline brine and coppery rust, like inhaling shards of glass. Sunlight fell on its shell, but there was no reflection. It was pitch black, swallowing all light. The orifice began to turn. All the appendages extended in one direction, like jellyfish tentacles sensing something. Then, the main mandible adjusted its angle, aiming directly at the Humvee. The gunner on the roof was still reloading the ammo belt, his hands trembling. The belt jammed at the feed, brass casings clattering to the ground. The creature's main mandible began moving toward him, its 6 legs advancing in alternating steps. With each step, the sand sank beneath its weight, the vibrations reaching my knees. I shouted something, my voice hoarse and barely audible even to myself. The creature reached for the Humvee roof. The massive mandible was now less than 3 feet from our vehicle's roof, the air thick with the stench of crushed bones from deep within its cavity. In the next second, the Humvee and all of us inside would be crushed between rows of barbed teeth like a wafer biscuit. I braced for death, finger tight on the trigger. But just as it was about to strike, something utterly bizarre and inexplicable happened. For the full version, visit my channel. Don't forget to subscribe.